killers. We're experts.
I'm telling you.
We're good at this.
We should have a show.
We could. We definitely could.
Isn't that what everyone says after a good conversation? We should start a podcast.
Oh yeah, we should start a podcast. Yeah, Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Ming Chen. I'm from a Shared Universe podcast studio. I'm here with Gina Gideon, who is a teacher, an educator, and a podcaster.
That's right.
And so welcome back.
Thank you.
What got you in here in the first place?
So it was right around the time where we were heading out of lockdown and into the hybrid classroom. I was very nervous. I had no idea how I was going to make it work, and I just thought of incorporating video into my teaching, a digital classroom. I didn't really know where to begin. I had no idea what I was doing. So I was just kind of like doing my version of it. So I came up with like a Passions and Careers podcast. And I had different guests on from all these different professions. And they talked about like finding their purpose and doing what they loved and being incredibly successful and sharing advice. It was pretty amazing.
And it looks like you got some really good stories out of people, which is why I love this so much.
But also, I know that at that age, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And, I think they all have that kind of theme in their stories, like figuring it out.
So in my mind, I've never thought of anything different. There's no difference between making dinner for your family or making a knife for someone else or making a railing for someone's house. It's all the same mindset. It's all the same mindset of being organized, having proper ingredients and technique, and giving them to someone.
When I started a business, to me, math was important. To me, the science was important. To me, physics I did. To me, geography was important. So right now you are at that stage where you are getting the gift of the foundation, the basics of knowledge. Just as a sponge, soak it up.
Was this your first podcast concept?
I felt like as a teacher, I should try my hand at like something that was a little bit more like content based. I had a lesson in mind, and how can I bring in an expert, to talk about it. So I would call in friends. We had like a lesson on the author's purpose. So my friend Stephen Longo, who had a lot of experience in broadcast news and entertainment television, he came on and talked about how news used to be unbiased and just informative, and how it evolved into more like persuasive techniques in entertainment television.
Oddly enough, that station was purchased by a station in Miami who started to blend entertainment and news into infotainment.
Any other concepts or?
Yeah, I also had another friend come on, and he spoke about like the important role his father played in Black history. And I also learned a lot from that podcast, because I realized that bringing family members on, and or even just people talking about their family history, so they document that and they have that as well. That's a nice gift to give to someone, that opportunity.
Yeah, and it kind of lives on forever, which is pretty cool.
Right.
So my father was Andrew Thomas Hatcher. He was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and he was the first Black associate press secretary for a president of the United States, which was for John F. Kennedy, and then later for Lyndon Johnson. This was really a critical time as the civil rights movement was taking place, and for my father to have had such a high position, it was probably one of the highest positions in a White House administration to that date. He was one of the first 6 appointees by the president-elect when he was elected. So he worked on the campaign for president, and a good friend of his, Pierre Salinger, was named press secretary.
I'm really glad you started this, because that means we got to meet.
Right.
That's when you started coming in the studio and you started creating podcasts for your students, your classroom.
Right. And I wanted them to get behind the mic. And so I always bring in the experts. So I had you on the show, which was really fun. They loved that. And you talked about podcasting, and then I had 2 podcasters come on and just, share some experiences and, give some advice.
I tried it out by myself at first, and I didn't like it too much. It's always good to have that person you can, have a conversation with. Or if you're going to do it by yourself, kind of do what you do and kind of have, I know, you know, like a guest or something like that. It's always better that way. But I would say find something that you are interested in, something that you could just talk, you know, and just doesn't even matter what it is.
Right. Camera.
I love it when people interview family members. It's something we've been preaching here. And it's like, hey, bring your mom in, bring your dad in, bring you know, bring your kid in, whatever. Especially, you know, at my age, my parents are getting elderly, and so I actually I have sat my mom and dad down, and I learned a lot.
Sure.
I learned a lot. It never really came up in natural conversation. A lot of the very basic questions I should have asked them before.
And I think this COVID time has taught us that there is definitely, you know, a medium out there that we have yet to fully tap into in terms of young people creating content, and us identifying that content, you know, as something, you know, that is meaningful. There's some things that they're on fire about inside, but they feel like it doesn't fit into this classroom. You know, so I think, you know, if students are on fire about things, they need to get, you know, they need to have the opportunities to express that, you know, that being on fire with, you know, in the classroom setting and create content, you know, about those different things that they're passionate about.
So how did you inspire any students?
You actually gave a lot of good advice, and they took it. They interviewed people they had access to. The podcast that I'm going to share today is a student who interviewed his grandfather, and it was awesome.
Amazing.
And in the summertime, especially during the 60s, there was still like the flower child hippie movement going on, protesting the Vietnam War. And the village was always crowded. It was like the happening scene. And I remember as a kid distinctly in the summertime that police buses would usually pull up, and the police would get out with their riot gear on, and they would march up McDougal Street into the village to like clear the crowds out and stop the protesting, even though mostly it was peaceful protesting. And that was like on almost a nightly basis in the summertime.
My favorite parts about doing something like this is you have total control over it. You produce it, you shoot it, you choose the direction that it goes in. You also get to book your own guests. Did you have any favorites?
Definitely one of my favorites would have to be Graham Salisbury. He was one of my first published authors. He was the author of my favorite short story called The Toy Store Monkey, which I had been reading and teaching for 20 years. And to finally meet him and get the behind the scenes story, you know, where the truth blended with the fiction, that was pretty mind blowing.
So yeah, this story was based on a true experience in my school. I mean, most of it is fictional, but the theme, you know, the real story is not fictional. It's sadly true.
I brought Graham back on the show, and I paired him up with another author, and students read 2 short stories, they did a literary analysis, and then they got the opportunity to create questions for the authors. So they have a lot of questions about the man in the well.
It's not a true story.
That's my first question.
It's an excellent story for a conversation, however.
And that brought me to another series called Closer to the Author, where I had them in book clubs, and they had a choice between like 10 books by 5 authors. And they read the books, they talked about the books, and they created like show introductions, guest introductions, questions for the author. It was a massive project, but it was so worth it. Welcome back to another JIDcast. I'm your host, Dina Gidio, and you're listening to the Closer to the Author podcast, the show that allows students to invest in young adult books and the authors who wrote them. From the classroom to the studio to cyberspace, thank you for tuning in.
And I read a sentence that said that 2,500 acres of desert had turned into glass because of the heat of the bomb. And I had never heard that before. So I went from the glass to the Trinity test to the Manhattan Project to the war. And so, but it all started with the glass.
Not only is Chopped the best show on the planet ever, it also was the answer to my novel. And it also represented everything about the way that I want to live life, which is that you never know what will be handed to you. but you get to decide what you're going to make out of it.
Well, in this particular scene, these women were looking for something to read. And I just, that really was, had an effect on me. I mean, it was powerful. I'm thinking they're in a dump, they're barely surviving, and yet they're looking for reading material. And so that's when I kind of realized, hey, I can mesh these two stories together. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that worked out.
So the synopsis is like who the characters are, what the buildup is, what the, essentially where it ends up, what I intend to say with the book. So if I know it well enough to synopsize it, that's kind of like my outline.
I think that as authors, our challenge is always going to be to try to be, broad-minded. We can have particular political views in our lives, but when we write, I think it's important to kind of like write with a certain love for humanity as a whole.
I'm very happy with how that came out, because I was at the end of the school year last year, so I was ready to take the summer off. But I apparently had one more podcast left in me that kind of came out of nowhere. I had a student kept showing up on my classroom's doorstep, and he kept asking me to be on the show. He wasn't my student, and I didn't know a lot about him. And I was like, okay, yeah, we'll do that, that. And he wasn't letting up. He definitely had a story to tell, and he was determined to tell it. So, it was the second to last day of the school year. I said, come on, let's do it. I sat him down. I clipped him up with a mic. I gave him an audience of like 60 classmates.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had never had a live audience before. I was nervous, but it was the most powerful and eye-opening episode I'd ever done.
That's great.
It was truly a special one, for sure.
Yeah, it's almost as if everything you did kind of led up to that, and you had the experience. You had you were prepared, whether you thought you knew it or not.
There's some questions you ask that you know the answers to.
Sure.
And then there are some questions you ask that you have no idea.
Yeah.
What's going to come up. And since I always over-prepare for guests, and I listen to their other podcasts, and I kind of know where we're going to go. This one, it was like I was flying blind.
Wow, that's great.
What's one of your greatest challenges right now?
My living situation. I don't live in like a house or apartment. I have to live in a hotel. I don't get to wake up to breakfast on the table or go Christmas, All these other kids get to do all of that. I got to sit by myself all day.
So you got through your shows, you got through your series, you accomplished what you wanted to do. Maybe even more, you got even more done than you thought you would.
I did.
What's next?
Good question. I don't know. I took the summer off, and then as I go into this new school year, I really don't know. It always evolves. Like something will, trigger an inspiration, and then each one then triggers an idea. And I also kind of gauge where the students are and what they want. You have to know your audience. It's always different.
Yeah, I love that you're doing this.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I started doing things like this, just to hear stories.
Yeah.
But now we can take advantage of the technology and connect people, and people love telling stories. So I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks.
So I hope you continue.
For full episodes, please visit my YouTube channel, Dina Gidio. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you're interested in seeing how this journey evolves.